Good afternoon and welcome to our special council meeting for Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. First item on the agenda under Land Acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to Métis District 1 Foothills. Agenda item 1.2, conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? None declared, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2.1, acceptance of the agenda for the special council meeting for October 30th, 2024. Are there any additions or deletions? Seeing I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the special council meeting agenda for October 30th, 2024 as presented. Council makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question in favor. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving down all the way to new business agenda 8.1, open session of the capital budget deliberations. And we have our Chief Financial Officer and Deputy CAO, Kyle Beauchamp, presenting. So Kyle, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thanks and good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight is our first budget meeting with you. So we are going to start with capital tonight. So we have a lot of smarter people than me on these projects who are going to walk you through all the various items that we have presented, help steer and navigate, and questions on the financial stuff. So for the capital budget, we're going to start with the fleet and equipment, broken it down by essentially function here. The conversation together amongst the like capital project. Okay, with further ado, we have Operations Director Terry May to start us off with the fleet capital. Terry?
Good evening, as Kyle, my name is Terry May. I'm the director, and we're going to start the fleet purchases for 5. The first item up is the town loader. Town currently runs with one loader, which serves all the departments equally. Snow removal, gravel, all kinds of materials. It's got about 7,000, just over now, and it's years old, and it was scheduled for that 15-year in the capital budget. It's been previously planned. It's been on the budget for a few years now. And
Yeah, so on the fund, all these projects, so we allocate annual funding of $250,000 a year to our fleet program. Essentially, all these programs, so we don't have to go out looking for any debt or grant we may have had to do 10 years ago to 5 years ago to purchase some of these. So that is going to be consistent for all the projects here. It's a point of or a question on how we proceed. Mr. Mayor, we can keep going through and then slightly pause for questions. We'll keep moving on.
Easier if while we're going through the deck that ask the question instead of the end.
Perfect. Thanks.
okay, if there's no questions on the loader, we'll move to the next slide. This item here is the town boom truck. We are going to own this until 2026. Was because it was on the budget for 2025. We've postponed it as we have a couple options and some changes in walk in the park, getting the amount of times a boom or an articulate and how much we've rented so far. We thought and see what those changes getting civic square space, not need to rent an articulating boom as much. The other component to that is leading up here, we were planning on replacing an articulating boom. Our arborist has we could get it's multi-use, more used throughout the departments instead of sticking with just which is just a lift. So we were going to pull this year and a bit more of a thorough review. We'll see this one next year. So the third item up for fleet is the town fire truck. The fire and as many events for the town. Past couple of years, we've done to it, tires, and some of the mechanical. Currently, this a transmission where we the transmission or repair of the drop box. It's a little bit more pricey. Really fit in our operating budget. That's why it's here. The other components to replace the brakes as well. We had some problems this year, so. And the here is area mower. Again, it's also in the a replacement in the plan. So it's something that's been seen. We have a 16 or more for replacement in 2020. It has about 3,500 and a little bit maintenance at the moment. Just no more. They have increased in price years. Like this will be 200,000. But we do need the larger just for the amount of surface area we cut. I quickly calculate 25 acres. I'm sure that more than that at this point. So again, another item for 2025 is replacement.
Council.
Thank you. Just approved a mower last year with a different mower, like it was, that was the smaller 0 one, correct?
That is correct.
So completely different use then.
Yeah, it's used in our cemetery and trees and small that we can't get to with these big ones, for mostly the sports fields and all the surrounding fields around town, the larger areas.
Hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Barry, is this one we have like this, or are we gonna, or is there more than one?
No, we have a 12-foot, 14-foot, and this is the 16.
So, and then we're gonna sell the one and just not, so two will be fine then to sell all this?
We will, yeah, 16-foot replacement on the Toro 3 or 4 years ago. That one went straight out to the quads and is still there, specifically for the sports fields, mowing every week. This one will be replaced and sold. There should be a fairly good value on this. I did do some checking on what they're selling for right now, and the numbers look pretty good. So,
Okay, thank you.
sorry.
So the next one we have, the final piece for equipment and fleet, is our GPS survey equipment. So this was in our capital plan for last year, always budgeted for 2025. So it's coming up. So just kind of the friendly reminder that the GPS survey equipment is coming up for $45,000 expense next year. So you can see on the slide all the things it is used for. This piece of equipment doesn't have a specific funding source. So we're funding this from our general capital reserve, the balance of $370,000 in it. But again, this isn't a reserve that we allocate any funding to it. So we're very cautious of what comes out of this reserve. Okay, next we're going to move on to our buildings and our facilities.
Councillor Beekman had a question.
Thank you. This is actually about items 1A and 1B. I didn't, because I have the same question for both of them, I wanted to wait till we were done in those. So for 1A and 1B, they're due for replacement. Is this end of life replacement, or are we seeing substantial failure with them?
No, this is just end of life for our life cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor, and through to Terry. Just further to Councillor Beekman's question regarding 1B, I'm just curious as to, obviously you have a proposal here for two different items here, option 1 and option 2, and I suppose that boom that you would be looking for would really be more purposeful for the new shift building, some of our outdoor stuff, and of course probably in the arena as well for light replacement and a few other jobs that you're going to be looking at for budget.
That's correct, and that's why we were leaning towards this. If we were still doing walk in the park, we did most of the decorating with a boom, and we spend a significant amount of dollars on renting booms. So it seemed the obvious choice. However, if you're to use it for your arborists to cut any heights above 12, 14 feet, then you need a second person. You got a trailer it around town. You have to, there's more components to using that. Whereas if we had a unit that could tow a chipper and had a truck box and had a boom, it would still handle all those other jobs, but it would also then support the arborist position. So that's where we're kind of in discussion as to what would be the most appropriate choice before we bring it to council.
And you're renting the one that's out here in Civic Square Plaza?
We are currently, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more questions, we're going to move on to our buildings and facilities. So I'll just touch kind of overarching on the funding first. So a lot of these projects, again, they're funded through our capital reserves, which we do allocate a specific amount to each facility to fund these projects. So they're not designed to fund like replacement of a facility, but more of just the kind of keep the doors open, again, fix the roof, fix various minor repairs as they come up. So you see most of those projects are funded like that. There are a couple where the project is, higher than what we have into reserves, or there's an opportunity to get some grants, in which we've listed some of these projects as grant dependent. That will come through the slides as well. And then a couple at the end that we right now don't allocate any funds to those capital reserves. So there's nothing to pull from those. So in those instances, what we generally do is first look at if there's a potential for any surplus revenue from the current fiscal year that could be reallocated as such to these projects that council may approve that doesn't already have a designated funding source. So that's the overarching theme on the funding. With that, we'll turn it back to Terry.
This item here is the water treatment, the current town's water treatment plant or the pump station. So if most of council has been in there, it has multiple roof layers or levels on it. There's the large one that was over the clarifier section. That section of the water or the pumping station is now pretty much empty. And then there's a smaller roof over the actual pump stations with skylights and access to remove pumps. Both are not in great condition at this point in time. However, the mid roof is leaking, and it's over the pumps, and most of the electrical components are close there. So we're looking to replace that lower roof next year, and then we'll look to bring back the bigger roof at another time. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Councillor Reese has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. My question was for Terry. Sorry to get you to come back up there for a second. So I'm just curious if you could just clarify for me. So we're opening up eventually in that new water treatment plant across by Boss Sod. So I understand that the leaks are right above the electric areas of the current pump station, so we need to fix it. But when do we expect to open up that new water station? And is this going to be a cost that is really needed? I'm sure it is, but I'm just, concerned about the new pump station being opened and this one needing repairs. Like, can you just clarify that for me, please?
Absolutely fair enough question.
Thank you.
The new pump station, and Dustin can correct me if I'm wrong, is supposed to be open by 2025, the end of 2025. And that will take over the water sourcing through the town. However, most of the electrical components will still be in there. And we also run backup power to the arena right now through the main control boards there. And as far as we don't really have a decommissioning plan yet for the remainder of the electrical there. So, yep.
Thank you for your time. I'll be able to explain some of these asks from our department. The first one on here is the library interior lighting, and the budget is $45,000. We have applied for a grant of $50,000, and should we not be successful in that, we'll come back to council about some other options. This is changing it over to LED lighting, and it will see an estimated $3,000 to $5,000 a year savings, besides helping the space be a little bit more bright. We have had to replace some ballasts of recent. The lighting is certainly at its end of life span, so we're doing everything we can to try to be successful at obtaining these funds to make this happen. All right, next. And the senior center is pretty much the same ask. A little bit less of a budget at $25,000, again going for a 50% grant, and that has been applied for as well.
Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just from my own understanding on those two items, are we still looking for the budget to approve the full scope of the budget here, regardless of the grant? Or are we only approving this in the event that we get the grant?
Turn that off, I'll comment. Oh. Yeah, right now we're just looking to approve it grant dependent. The reason being is looking at the funding sources, the senior center, if you don't get that grant, if we look at the reserves that's on it, right, there's $112,000 in reserves. So if you don't get that grant, you've got enough in the piggy bank. If you want, you can go for that. When we start looking at the library, we did some renovations at the library this year. We have the lights, and the roof is also scheduled to be replaced in the next year or two. So if that one you don't get the grant, you're a little more tighter on funds there. So that may require a little more like jostling of some of the projects, maybe working with the library board a little more on some of the potential funding. So that's why right now we're just hoping to present it as grant dependent as the best scenario that we believe we're going to achieve. And then if we don't get the grant, come back to council, because in the case of the library, we may have some options to discuss based on the future capital we know that's coming from the library and the funds we have available right now.
Okay, so just follow up, using the library as an example, because that'll answer both questions. So that $45,000, that's $45,000 if we have the grant, or $45,000 without the grant?
That's the total cost of the project. So that would be without the grant. On the budget, we would have half of that right now. Yep.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay, and moving along, we have the arena compressor rebuild. And so you may remember that in 2023, the M4 compressor was rebuilt. There are two compressors at the arena. And this is the backup one at 2M compressor, and it will be over its hours sometime this season, actually very soon. We look at rebuilding these compressors because we're guarding against emergencies. A full compressor replacement is substantially more than doing these at the recommended hours on a preventative maintenance basis. And it also provides cost savings in the long run because the compressors are working at its best capacity is also an energy savings. And so we are looking at funding this project at $17,500 out of the reserves. So. Any questions? All right.
Councillor Chapman has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through to Russ. There are 4 compressors. Is that how that works?
Thanks for the question. There's 2 compressors at the arena. There's 1 compressor at the curling club.
Okay.
The curling club one's the next one. So,
yeah. And that was that compressor for the curling club was done in 2014. I think it was in line with Masters. Is that the same one?
It would have been done likely between that time and now as well, at least once, right? Yeah, they go through these 1,500 hours generally between 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Has been my experience anyhow, but it'll depend on the winters and the temperatures and all those other things. So, yeah. And so what you have at the arena, the reason you have 2 is because 1 compressor on its own in high demand won't be able to handle that. So you have to be able to, in high demand on the larger ice surface that's got the activity it's got on there, there will be times where both are running.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Councillor Pickering has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to. So will you alternate, like, now that you're rebuilding the second one, will it be the main one then, and then you'll switch the other one to standby?
Good question. That's how a few arenas would work. And if we were ever twin, that's what we'd do but we'd have 2 large compressors. In this case, the large compressor is the main one, and the M2 gets rebuilt fewer between because it kicks in high demand.
Oh,
it wouldn't be able to handle it.
So you can't alternate them back and forth to compensate wear and tear on them. So the main one runs all the time. This is just the backup for higher demand.
So for clarity, we could alternate them if we wanted to, but the 2M compressor would come up due way sooner because it doesn't have the same capacity as the M4.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right. And so some of the same dialogue and information exists also for the curling rink compressor rebuild, but this is their one and main and only compressor. So, and this is the large one, and that's why you see the cost at $23,000. It is a larger one. I shouldn't say is the large one. It's the only one at the curling club, but it's the size of the large arena. Okay.
Councillor Pickering has another question.
Thank you, Duress. So just out of curiosity, is this one at the curling rink the same size as the big one at the skating rink?
I believe it's a comparable size, but I don't know the make of it, so I won't say that it's an M4, but it is a large compressor.
Because
Yes.
I was just kind of curiously thinking, what would be the cost difference to make the ones at the rink the same, so we'd get that constant wear on both of them instead of.
We could certainly look at that. My recommendation would be the time to do that would be when you twin the facility, because you still do get some of the cost savings out of the fact that it's cheaper to maintain and rebuild the M2, and it really is only required in high demand.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, moving right along. The tot lot waiting pool. So maybe some of you may have remembered that we did have some issues with some leakage that we chased for a little bit there, and we have we've fixed that. Some of the water migration from inside and below has caused some cracking in what the surface that exists on the tot lot waiting pool right now is at the what we call kind of the scum line coping. There's some tile, but then it stops and it's a marcite finish, and the marcite has lifted in some places and cracked, and is obviously causing some safety concerns and things like that. But we feel like we can smooth that surface out, and we can use a acrylic paint to be able to prolong the life of the existing basin. The only other option would be to pull the marcite out and completely redo it, and you're looking at upwards of $85,000 to $100,000. We don't feel we're there yet. We feel we can make this look new with some paint and repairs on some tile, and get through a number of years yet before doing that. And so we're asking for $15,000 to be able to do that. Okay. Next, the swimming pool boiler. This is one that was unforeseen. As you can imagine, those boilers, they're big units, and they do a lot of work during the small season that we have for an outdoor pool, but it is what keeps the pool warm. We had some issues with it early on this past season, and we actually even had it go out and had some cold water for a few days before barely getting it back up and going, and we were recommended that it may not actually start back up for us once we got it to limp through the season and then turned it off. So we are recommending replacing the boiler that is there for $50,000. And along with that, there will be some changes in ventilation and requirements with code and stuff to be able to make that work. And that will certainly last longer than the lifespan that the building will last. So,
Russ, I have a question regarding that. So if we replace the boiler, will that have anything to do with what the water temperature will be for the seniors in their lane swimming that I always get calls on that the water's too cold?
yeah, it'll certainly help us maintain. There was at least one of the times that you were called were because of the boiler going down, likely a couple times. Generally speaking, though, sometimes, to be honest with you, they did a better job this year of it, but some of that is operational too. They were filling at times, in the morning, the lifeguards would get there and do what they feel were helping the situation, but filling with cold water didn't help. But the boiler, if we don't have this piece of equipment, we will not have a heated pool, and it'll be very cold.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Russ, so there was no real, my only question is that there was no anticipation of this boiler uh, packing it in, I guess is the word.
There's not. You take your home mechanical systems that sometimes just all of a sudden go on you, and you times it by these big ones and well built. It's been there a long time, and you maintain it the best you can for as long as you can. And we didn't anticipate this for sure.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Avery had a question.
Thanks, Mayor. And this might be an old question, but is this something that maybe we should have looked at claiming through insurance years ago when that building flooded out and water was halfway up through that boiler? Do you think that could have contributed to this problem, or is it just old age?
So what I can say is certainly things like that. It's a good point to make that can contribute to these. Having said that, understanding like the service that we've done on this boiler the last few years and what they found in startup the last few years, this is more of a combustion efficiency issue than my best guess based on that question would be that it's time. Yep. Okay. And staying with the pool, we have an automated underwater vacuum that goes into the pool 3 to 4 times in a week just to maintain the pool basin free of debris. It saves a lot of staffing time and things like that. These do last, especially with these seasonal pools, 6 to 8 years. We couldn't tell you what year this one is because none of us were around currently that when this was bought, but it's certainly done its time. We've replaced parts on it for the last couple of years. Those parts now on the existing model are no longer existing, and this is a very close. This is a replacement of a very close to the same piece of equipment that we're asking here at $5,500.
Councillor Reese has a question.
Thanks, Mayor. Through to us. Just a question. This is kind of a cool little thing. I've never seen one before. So is it operated by a remote, or do you just put it in there and it just does its thing? Like, how does it?
It's a really good question. Like you put it in there and it does its thing, but it also has a remote so that if it had missed anything or whatever, you could drive it back over that. The new models do for sure. The one that we had didn't have a remote. They just come with them now. So good question. Yep. Okay, and on to the next one, the building, the window film at Civic Square. So as many of you may be aware, and if you've had meetings in the Del Monte boardroom in the mornings, you may have experienced this yourself, but also those of us that have offices that face east and south experience a little bit of a temperature fluctuation, and usually warmth in the morning and then cooling in the afternoon. But part of that is because of the sun and the temperature that's coming in through the windows. And what we're recommending here is a window safe film that offers 74% heat reduction, 99% UV rejection, and 34% glare reduction. This will increase energy efficiencies and reduce glare, help with uniform temperatures. It'll protect against UV rays and protection for fabrics and furnitures as well. So it'll enhance our occupancy appeal as well. We're looking at, it would cost $12,000 to do this application. And it's not mentioned in here, but because there are different products out there. And when we previously looked at doing this, there were some concerns with warranty of the glass because, the glass itself was not rated for that. But the firm that we've quoted this off of and gotten this product from will warranty the windows with this application as well.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a curious question. So the windows that we do have in here are not UV rated. Was that something that was kind of like an oversight during the construction period, or was it something that that we looked at and decided this was the route to go?
Well, I think it's a difficult thing to totally understand how far you need to go with those types of applications prior to being in the building and occupying it. But they don't have this application built within them, and I don't believe in any of the existing windows, which you generally don't tend to experience from the west facing like you do the east. So, but
Oh, I agree. This is an important part of our workspace, and I'm speaking in favor of it. I'm also curious as to the life cycle of that tent, if that's sort of forever or if it's going to have to be replaced every so many years.
that's a really good question because it's evolved over the years. The early versions of the tint, I don't know if you'll even notice, and it kind of answers your first question to Councillor Chapman. But like at the rec center, the same. Like it's common for people to build a building and understanding that how far this technology has come. It is a lifespan of it now. It's very differently done. It lasts a long time. But at the rec center, as you come into the lobby area, you may not even notice a difference from the day we open, but we've actually applied the same application, anticipating it there and having had the budget there. We applied the same there, and I even believe actually up in the gym that Twisted still has applied it, and you can't tell that it wasn't a part of the window any longer. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just probably a silly question, but is this budget ask and the plan here just to do the southeast windows, or are we planning on doing them all?
This is asking just for the east and the south facing windows.
Okay, how much more would it take? Like, would we be doubling it to do every window?
I can't say for sure, but that would be a pretty good estimate. Likely around double for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? All right. Continuing on. The arena, ceiling and lighting. This has been a project we've been going after for a little bit, and we wanted to bring in front of council similar to what we have done with the library and the senior center, so that, when you hear from some of the user groups or when you go and watch a game and kind of see the condition of the low ceiling roof, that we have been applying for grants. We do feel like we've got a plan in place here that has got a better chance at it than it has had in the past for gaining some funding for this. But this is talking about the insulated ceiling in the arena that exists but is in rough shape, and then the old lighting as well. And the reality is our thinking is that it's not what do I want to say? It wouldn't be prudent to be able to do just one and not the other. They kind of go hand in hand because they'll impact each other. So we've applied for grants, and this next page shows that. So we've applied for a couple grants. First one being the CEC grant for 50% funding of the lighting portion. Same grant that we've applied for in other buildings. And we've also applied for another grant, the GICB, which is a rather new program, and it can fund up to 80% of the total project. So our best guess of what we're likely looking at funding wise, we've provided two options here. And the option one is, if we're successful for both, we're looking at a project at $192,000 being funded on our portion being $7,491.14. And if we're not to get the 50% grant, which was just our best in conversations with grant administrators, and the likelihood of us getting grants is it might be one of the most likable options, is if we lost one or the other grant. We kind of feel like which is good for us, that 80% one likely we're feeling pretty comfortable about. Having said that, then we're looking at a contribution of close to $40,000. And we've already, polled and had discussions with the Friends of the Arena. Friends of the Arena is also open to the idea of this type of improvement at the arena for them to come in and step and be part of funding if required. And so there's two different options here that we anticipate. We're hoping to be in that boat, either option 1 preferably or option 2, worst case. Well, next worst case scenario, we don't get either grant, but we'd come back to council for that discussion.
Russ, for the Friends of the Arena, who has control over those funds?
So the Friends Arena is kind of so for those that maybe don't know, and those viewers too, is there's a portion of the advertising agreement that the Copperheads do each year that comes back to Friends of the Arena fund, and it builds on that fund, and that fund's sitting just over 80. Actually that's not in, recognized it in here, but it was last time I looked at it in the high 80,000. Is what's sitting in that fund. And what happens is when there's a dressing room enhancement, or there's something that users of the arena are asking for, we go then to figure skating, Coaldale minor hockey, then the Copperheads, and we ask their opinions on it, and then it's up to us to be able to work with the feedback. And generally speaking, we try to go with the majority rules and support of that. And through my experience up to this point in time, everybody has worked well together with wanting the same thing and working towards these enhancements. So, but it is ultimately us that in the end have those funds and administer those. So
It's in a town of Coaldale Bank.
it is, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beekman.
Thank you. It's less about the budgetary impact, more just a question. What are we? What style of lighting are you looking at? Just because in my experience, I've actually broken one of these lights, getting a puck cut up there before. So I'm genuinely curious because this is something that's been needed for a long time. So wondering what your vision is. We obviously can't go higher into the ceiling. What are your thoughts?
Good question. And you're right. We can't. We've had the question as to some of these older rinks have opened up the ceiling portion, and some of these older rinks have trusses that are like 15 feet apart. That's not the case for the structure of this metal roof and structure. And so we do have to stay below that at, I think we're approximately 17, 18 feet above the ice, which is a low arena roof. The lighting that we are looking at is LED lighting, and there is LED lighting for arenas that have lenses that are highly durable to be able to handle pucks. So,
awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Okay. Next is the museum exterior painting. And so when we did the foundation repairs to the museum, we did do some stucco repair and match to be able to make it look uniform. And it was at that time that it was recommended to us to do this acrylic type paint. It's essentially a clear gloss with the color within it, and what it does is it just protects the stucco and prolongs the life of stucco. This was originally slotted in for 2025 just so that it was a placeholder. The condition of the stucco for this building is such that it's still holding up, and we've suggested that we push this back to 2027. Okay, and then here's an interesting one, the batting cages. So since we've moved into the space at the Shift Community Recreation Center, we've had a number of user groups, baseball user groups, wanting to use the space and have used the space and have brought in some equipment to make it work, and then just provided the activity is such that they're able to use that space currently. If we were to put in a batting cage, which we have, there's already electrical and structural existing on the very south third of that space, south of the big fan. This cage would come down from the ceiling, and it would the one that is quoted right now is a 70 by 15. We'd be, because of feedback from users, we'd be looking at an 80 by 15, and what we would do is once we got this equipment, we would charge for use of that as well. So it would also inject another revenue stream because obviously the upkeep of the equipment and use would be in mind. So we are asking that we go ahead and use $30,000, especially if we, when all is said and done from our fundraising efforts, if we have this money available to be able to use that for. So.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I did a little bit of thinking about this, and I like the idea. I'm just curious, Russ, as to maybe a proposal for a cost share in the purchase of this, and whether the user groups may want to be part owners in that funding model for it. Just a question, and we don't have to have answers right now, but just my thoughts.
We are researching the opportunity for that, and have been in conversations about that possibility. It's just at this point in time there hasn't been any commitment.
Okay, thank you.
But we'll continue to try. Yep. Okay.
So the next three projects we have here could be classified as enhancements to the outdoor space here for Civic Square. And with the project, the construction project expected to utilize the full budget that council had previously approved for this project. These three items that are being presented are, again, enhancements that would be over and above what we have. So until the project, is finalized, once you have the outdoor rink and actually people out there skating, sometimes it takes a little bit to grow into the space and see kind of what best suits there. So just talking on the budget perspective, again, this isn't an area right now where we have allocated or allocate any funds to reserve to fund these on a yearly basis. And so with this being an enhancement, what we've done is said, okay, if we wait till our fiscal year is completed, so by March, April next year, we've had the winter season to utilize the space as a community to see what additions are best needed. And then if there is additional revenue surplus from our fiscal year, council can look at reallocating that towards these enhancements proposed as well.
Okay, and with that, the first project that we're looking at is basically looking at extending the technologies and things that exist here in the indoor Civic Square space out to the outdoor with speakers and things like that. So speakers, amps, wiring, the QSYS hardware system, and so in essence, what is happening in the building can also be extended externally out to the square space as well. What we'd also add to this is a single projector with an outdoor enclosure. And what the outdoor enclosure means is it's a protection of that projector. And as you'll see, actually, so that's our first option at $55,000 to be able to do that, to get that space operational, and we'd be looking at that projector being able to be projected down onto the ice surface. They can become interactive. They can become pretty much, there's actually going to be an example of one on the very next page. So there you go. The other option is to spend more money. Obviously, it costs a little bit more, but an additional $50,000 would get additional projectors, and you could project these images onto the building, both in the back area and the front. Sometimes these replace Christmas type lighting schemes, things like that. And so we wanted to show council the opportunities that are out there and some of the cost, the budget that we've come up with concerning that. And yeah, this one right here, Clayton's done a really good job of researching this and all the different visuals, interactive storytelling and art and entertainment that can actually come out of this. It's pretty exciting, we think. Any questions? It is.
Dustin Yankee, Director of Infrastructure. So this is another one of those items, as Kyle mentioned, would be service enhancement. So this was included as part of the original scope. That's why it's coming back exactly how it was originally proposed. So when we tendered the project, it came over budget, and then we came back to council and identified some cost-saving opportunities. This was one of them. So essentially, we're putting it back to council that if you do want to do this for 2025, as it's designed here, we'd be looking at about $70,000. There was opportunities with in-house, our facility enhancement specialist, that he could do some of this work to potentially shave those numbers down. But really, we're looking to council to know if this is something that is a priority in the near future.
Question for you, Dustin, on that. So we have 4 fire pits, but you're only looking at 2 of the gazebos then?
That's correct. That's how it was originally designed. So if council wanted to add covers to the other ones, we would have to look into that further. So specifically, the eastern fire pits have, as I mentioned here, a thickened slab around the perimeter for the structure of the gazebo, as well as conduit ran to the base for speakers and lights.
Yes, I just wanted a clarification. And then also when you mentioned that it was, you took it out of the main scope of the project, by doing so, were you able to save some funds to pay for these? Or is this going to be over and above the budget for the outdoor civic square space?
This would be over and above. So when we deleted it from the project, then when we came back to council to ask for the set budget amount, it was excluding these at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the kind of third part that we moved on to is the construction project. So again, just briefly touching on the funding. So the first 2 that we talked about, equipment and fleet, as well as the building and facilities. Just a reminder again, those were ones which we were allocating annual reserves to each year to fund these projects. But they're used to fix, again, repairs and maintenance to a lot of these facilities. When we're on to our construction projects and our utility projects, these are more the new facilities or substantial reconfiguration or renovations. So the majority of these projects, as you'll see, are funded through some type of grant or offsite levies. When we're speaking in grants, there's essentially 2 streams. There are the grants that we apply for and we hope to get. For example, the lagoon rebuild and the water reservoir, there were various grants that we applied for that we were hoping to get that we did get. So those aren't guaranteed. We do also have grants every year that we are allocated to based on a certain population base and whatnot. Those are our Canada Community Building Fund and the LGFF. So those are grants that were allocated every year that they are essentially we're playing Jenga a bit and allocating the funds to these different projects as they come up. So just a little preface on the funding for these projects. That I'll turn it back to Dustin.
Westland site, proposing to council to allocate $25,000 to clean up the site. So essentially remove any debris, hazardous materials, ensure the site is safe and visually appealing. And then in-house, working with our parks department, they would come up with a landscape design and execute that work. So we're proposing essentially once the building is removed, if it's removed, from there, we would clean the site up and allocate a bit of money to make it look nice in the interim until council wishes to invest in it further. So essentially, we're just cleaning it up and doing a bit of landscaping across the space. The 20th Street, 845 intersection with 30th Ave. So originally this was identified in 2021 through a traffic impact assessment for the South Coldell area. Alberta Transportation has indicated that these upgrades would be required upon submission of a roadside development permit. So pending the timing of the Canal Crossings development, we're anticipating that this could be required as early as 2025. So that's why we're bringing it to council now so that we can prepare, if we do need to move forward, that the funding is there to allow that development to proceed. And then just touching base on the scope, essentially it's mostly on the east side of the intersection. It's improving the radius around the corners and aligning the intersection east-west more appropriately. Cost-wise, we're looking at approximately $400,000. So we have engaged with Alberta Transportation recently, and there is more work that's required here to confirm the scope. Essentially, the TIA that was done in 2021 needs to be revisited from their perspective. So in terms of the exact scope, we're not anticipating any big changes, but ultimately we're at the mercy of Alberta Transportation and how they specifically define the scope upon submission of the roadside development permit.
Dustin, just a question on 30th going east towards the quads. There's no funding set aside to look after putting in some designated pathway for people walking along 30th, whether it be just lined or some other way of identifying the pedestrian path.
There hasn't been a capital project brought forth on that to date, so there's no funding allocated aside from the specific intersection improvements that are required for Alberta Transportation. So anything past the base requirement for Alberta Transportation would be an extra ask. So there's no current project to improve that aside from the lane that is currently painted on the north side.
And then as part of 17th with the Canal Crossings project, that'll be funded by the developer to widen 17th, so there's a designated pathway on that one then.
That's right. We'll get to that project shortly, but yes, the 17th Street will be upgraded to have pathway mobility. Essentially, it'll be a sidewalk.
Thank you. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Dustin. Has this section of 30th, like the mayor brought up, has this been like checked into what it cost would be to do that up to 17th?
We haven't looked at it recently. I know quite a while ago, I believe 30th Avenue was a discussion with council, and there was talks about upgrading, including roundabout at 17th Street. So since then, we haven't looked at extending it. Essentially, all we've proposed so far is the base requirements and then including 17th Street.
Okay, thank you.
Skate park. So you guys are probably familiar from my presentation on Monday, but essentially working with the Coldell Kinsman group, we're looking at revitalizing the skate park. It's a total budget of 1.2 million, but essentially rebuilding the entire skate park to be more inclusive for all wheels and essentially improve the design to attract more users. So from the town's perspective, our contribution to the project, essentially the budget ask is 400,000. And then the Kinsmen have allocated 400,000 and also applied for an additional 400,000 to the CFEP program under the large stream. And this is just a rendering, giving an example of what the new skate park will look like. The Rehoboth pathway was originally suggested by a concerned citizen in 2022 when council identified the improvement of active transportation connectivity to Rehoboth as a priority. So as a result, paid pathway was approved during 2023 budget deliberations, and essentially we are bringing it back to proceed to construction in 2025. So it'll be a 430 meter pathway extension that will tie into what's being installed as part of the Phase 2 sanitary trunk main project along Highway 845, and will create a continuous connection from South Coldell to Rehoboth with a node that can be expanded further east along 12th Avenue in the future to provide active nodes connectivity to the industrial park. Based on feedback from residents, we're also proposing to build a raised concrete crosswalk from the Gem of the West Museum parking lot to the cemetery entrance so that access can be improved during runoff conditions due to the gravel alley having poor drainage. Looking at $250,000. So last year we had $200,000 allocated. We're looking to bump this up a little bit to give us a little bit more ability to improve the asphalt structure itself. We've been experiencing some cracking on our asphalt pathways, so just trying to be mindful of risks that do come forward on these types of projects. So giving us a little bit more budget to essentially mitigate those risks if they do come forward. Lastly, I guess The one piece that still needs to be confirmed is the alignment through Rehoboth. So we're currently engaging with them to figure out how that would look through there.
Deputy Mayor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dustin. Very intrigued and pleased to see that you want to get this on the agenda for capital project. I know you're absolutely right that this has been a concern from concerned citizens in our community. My question to you, Dustin, is if you're building or upgrading or building 21st Street up to a standard that will be both a pathway and a roadway, would there be a need to have a crosswalk, like you're proposing a concrete crosswalk to this project?
So if
That'll be at the museum to the cemetery.
I guess just to reiterate your question, so I understand, you're asking if we were to upgrade 21st Street to basically an asphalt structure, would that be required? I would say no. If we were to invest in paving all of 21st Street, that would be obviously significantly more money, but that would mitigate the concerns of the mud in the alley.
All right, so you're proposing to gravel or to asphalt?
It would be an asphalt pathway on the west side of 21st Street. So all we're proposing as part of this project is the pathway. So it'll be a pathway on the west side. And then we're just proposing to put in a concrete walkway, essentially, from the Gem of the West Museum parking lot to the cemetery. So it's kind of just an opportune time while the contractor's there to add that concrete crossing, just to improve mobility in the area.
I'll be interested to hear more about it. I don't want to get into the weeds with it right now, but I know that with the amount of traffic that occurs there, particularly for events at the museum or at the cemetery, I know that dust or water or mud is really a problem all along there where people are parking. And so I just want to be interested to see how you'd like to address that.
Malay Drain Phase 2B project. Again, you're probably familiar from presentation on Monday, but this project is essentially building a 1,200 millimeter pipeline that connects the Cottonwood Pond to the raw water reservoirs, which would be reinstating for the collection of stormwater, largely for rural floodwater that comes into Coaldale, which accounts for approximately 54% of the stormwater. So this project is in partnership with the St. Mary River Irrigation District and Lethbridge County. We're proposing total budget of $4.9 million, and then given the grant funding that we've received to date, totals $4,222,320. It leaves a balance of $675,000 total. So between the tri-party, they would give our share a total of $225,000. I believe on the spreadsheet you guys might be looking at, there's a typo there. So just correction that our contribution would be $225,000, which is the ask. And this project is slated to start construction very shortly. They'll be starting to mobilize crews in the next couple of weeks and stripping topsoil, with completion targeted in the spring. Extending off this project is the South Coaldale Regional Stormwater Management Facility. So immediately south of the Cottonwood Pond, this new stormwater management facility will tie into the new pipeline that we're building as part of the Malloy Drain Phase 2B project. We were successful in getting grant funding recently from the Drought and Flood Protection Program from the province, where they've provided us with $3,612,000. So from the project total cost of $5,326,000, it leaves the tri-party share at $1,714,000. So the ask to council to proceed with this project would be $572,000. In terms of scheduling, we'd be looking at moving into construction in the spring of 2025. potable water reservoir and pump station. So this project was identified back in 2019, where it was noted that our current reservoir lacks sufficient storage capacity to meet the demands of future growth and development, while also ensuring community has adequate fire flow. This new reservoir will have 8,300 cubic meters of storage and a pumping capacity to service Coldell's 25-year growth horizon. Total projected costs, $13,038,000. Grant funding received to date is $5,062,158, which leaves the town's contribution at $7,975,842. So similar to the Moy 2B project, these have come to council prior. Essentially, we're just looking to reconcile the funding streams. Yeah. The Phase 2 sanitary trunk main project involves upsizing the sanitary main along 20th Street, Highway 45 between 14th Avenue and 16th Avenue, and further along 16th Avenue between 845 and 23rd Street. This larger diameter pipe will support continued growth on the west side of Coldell, while also improving surface drainage along 16th Avenue through the reconstruction and extension of the underground storage system. Be able to address historical stormwater inflow and infiltration issues as well. Along the 845 section, we'd be looking at simply trench restorations, and then along 16th Avenue, we'd be looking at a full corridor rebuild. So 16th Avenue road will see a significant upgrade. Currently, there are fairly significant surface drainage issues along 16th, so that would be one of the additional benefits of this project. And lastly, part of the project scope, we're proposing to extend the pathway system. So currently near the Kinsman Picnic Shelter, the pathway dead ends into the Birds of Prey. So it'd be tying into that to extend further east to Highway 845, and then further north along Highway 845 to tie into that new Rehoboth connection that we proposed. In terms of scheduling, we'd be looking at splitting this project into 2 construction seasons, with the Highway 845 section to be completed in 2025 and 16th Avenue to be completed in 2026. And this is just a figure showing those 2 phases. In terms of budget, we're looking at a total cost of $5.1 million. So in 2025, the section along Highway 845, $1.88 million, and then 16th Avenue looking at $3.22 million. Funding source includes debenture debt, road reserve account, $1 million for the road portion, and off-site levies. Sure. Yeah. This item was discussed with council in the spring as part of the water conservation discussion. So we're bringing it back as promised. Essentially, we're recommending to defer it at this time for a number of reasons. So I guess just to give a bit of an overview, the raw water system currently feeds most of the quads. So it feeds most of the baseball diamonds, the soccer fields, and then there are the 2 soccer fields in the ITB fields, we call them, that are on potable water. So what was posed to council originally was, can we get the ITB fields off of potable water? What upgrades could we implement to achieve that? So after further investigation, we've identified that the current pump that's there is unfortunately near capacity. So to add more zones onto it, we would be looking at either watering during the daytime periods, because the current system is already pretty much maxed out, like I said, or upgrading to a larger pump system. Speaking with our operators, they have a number of challenges with the water that comes from the canal in terms of the quality and the filtration system maintenance that's required. So if we were to put more water through this system, we'd also recommend improving the filtration system, either improving the system itself or constructing some sort of settling pond. So it was identified that there is potential to construct a settling pond inside the raw water reservoirs. we are reinstating these as part of the Moy 2B project. This settling pond could be done at any point in time. There is no benefit of doing it as part of the project next year per se. The one other aspect that came to light was that we were hopeful that we could potentially use stormwater to irrigate from the pond. After getting further along into the design and touching base on with our consultants and the stormwater modeling, it's not anticipated that this pond would have water in it very often. This is a pond for the very large events, so it does have a lot of capacity. And then the other aspect is that there are dam safety requirements, it's called, which is legislated requirements on essentially the safety on how we operate that facility. So due to the stability of the banks, our consultants will be giving us stipulations on essentially how fast that pond can be drawn up and down and how full it can be and how long it can be full. So there's very specific operational stipulations that we have to follow. So there's potential that we could use stormwater, but when and how much stormwater will be in there is unreliable. Lastly, we have been brainstorming other potential opportunities, looking at the potable water reservoir and pump station located south of the arena. It is still planned to be used to a degree. As Terry mentioned, we're trying to work through a decommissioning plan, but currently in that building is our irrigation pump for the Millennial Park, Jenny Emery, R.I. Baker, St. Joe's. So that pump gets water from the Coldell Lateral and feeds those areas. So we're fortunate that a lot of our green spaces are irrigated off of raw water. So one of the other options that we're looking into is expanding off of this system further, what feasibility is there, and then I guess the long-term plan for the reservoir itself. So with all this in mind, there are a lot of moving pieces, and we would like to, I guess, come up with a better recommendation at this time. So given that it's not an urgent need, we would recommend to defer for future upgrades, and we'll bring back a more conclusive recommendation.
Any questions for Dustin before he leaves the stage?
Thank you, Dustin. Open up to members of council. Any follow-up questions for any of the line items?
Sorry, Mayor, we do have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So this particular project is the relocation of the irrigation line for the SMRID within the Northwest Lands, so that quarter section that the town had purchased to provide for the high school and recreation center, and where the new neighborhood is currently going in. So you can see that the budget proposal is $100,000 funded from the sale of those Northwest lands. One of the requirements from that sale is that this project be undertaken prior to Phase 1B and Phase 2 of the development project. The developer's looking to entertain Phase 1B in the coming spring. And so the red line shown on the screen here shows the existing SMRID line that needs to be relocated to mirror the roads. So that'll be southbound on 30th Street and then extended eastbound along 18th Avenue. And again, cost of that project is about $100,000.
Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to Cam. So this, you're replacing that line that cuts across there. They're removing the old line out of there too at the same time. And that 100,000, is that sufficient to do this?
Yeah, my understanding is $100,000. Engineers have determined $100,000 is the cost. I believe our requirement is strictly with the installation of the new line. Is that correct? And the developer will be removing the old line.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. In the project description, this is proposed to satisfy a previous purchase agreement. Is this something we're kind of bound to do then?
Fundamentally, in order for them to be able to proceed forward with the future phases, yes, I would say so.
So essentially, we've already committed to this pretty much.
Yeah, this is really us doing it in the spring of 2025.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. So is there any questions, further questions for Cameron or any of the other presenters on the slide deck that we just viewed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So I'm going to need a motion that council receive the open session of the capital budget presentation as information. Who cares to make that motion? Councillor Pickering. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. So that concludes the open portion of the meeting. I will require a motion at 6:15 p.m. that council move into closed session in accordance with section 197-4-B of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for item 13.1, subject to section 16, business interests of a third party, and section 21, intergovernment relations. Who cares to make that motion? Councillor Saylor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?